Okay, it's 2 o'clock, so we will start on time. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Shanna Duthie. I'm going to be your moderator today. I have the privilege of leading the AI On-Site Power Task Force at EGSA, and this group of ours was built for one reason, that it's going to make sure that our industry can move forward with AI in a way that actually works in the real world and not in just theory. So, one of those ways that AI can and cannot work for you is within cybersecurity. We felt as a committee or as a task force that this was really important for us to talk to because AI touches your systems and your data, and that can totally change your risk profile. This is going to be a live moderated Q&A session. So we have gathered questions in advance, and we're also going to bring in your live questions as we can. This is not presentation. We are not lecturing. We are focusing on conversation of what's actually happening. So I'm today joined by two people who spend their time dealing with this directly, Terry Zimniak and Shauna Fippen. They both work with companies day to day on how to secure their systems, manage risk, and make smart decisions as AI becomes more part of everyone's operations. So, our goal today is simple to give you a clearer view of what your risks are and how to move forward without creating problems you can't even see yet. So, I'm going to ask our participants to tell us all a little bit about themselves and their backgrounds. So Terry, can you please start, and then Shauna, can you please follow?
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon. My name is Terry Zimniak. I work as a cybersecurity executive. I've been doing this for about 25 years now. The first 15 years in big organizations across the US, and now the past 10 years as what you call a fractional CISO. So it's a part-time cybersecurity executive is how I consult. Mostly that's dealing with cyber issues for my clients. So that's ransomware, it's business resiliency. How do we stay up when we have attacks? Incident management, vendor management, risk management, all this sort of stuff. But more and more people are asking about AI. Everyone wants to get into AI. We all at least recognize the potential value to our business. But I think it's prudent that companies take a moment to think about the cyber and compliance and privacy issues behind AI, and that's where I've been helping my clients a lot lately. All right, Shauna, on to you.
Awesome. Terry, I'll follow you. Yeah, Shauna Fippen here with Redbox. We're headquartered in the San Francisco Bay Area, but we have clients throughout the country and outside of the country as well. Our team is about 300 deep in different departments specializing in cybersecurity, managed IT services, data management, compliance, and artificial intelligence, of course. And I think this is so awesome of Shauna and Jake and EGSA to design this AI task force because it is definitely a critical part of any company today is being able to leverage AI in ways that produce actual tangible business outcomes. But even more important, as Shauna had mentioned, is managing that risk around it because there are significant risks if it's not deployed correctly. So similar to Terry, what he shared on the security side of things, all AI roads for us lead to security and controls first. And being a CISO, a Chief Information Security Officer, is a remarkable endeavor. And we have a number of CISOs and CISSPs on staff have been leading the managed services arena for quite some time when it comes to security and controls. So an honor to be here and excited to share some value, education, and get to make a few new friends.
Wonderful. So I am now going to throw the first question at you. So, where does AI increase our risk the most right now? Is it email and phishing? Is it call center impersonation? Is it customer portals, internal automation? Do you think the biggest risks are?
Terry, do
Uh,
you want to start or you want me
Shauna,
to?
we'll start with you. You're on camera right now. Let's just go for it.
Okay, you got it. Yeah, I would say really when ChatGPT, came out. That's what really started to kick off. Artificial intelligence has been around since the 70s. And we actually helped do some of the critical infrastructure for a couple of the leading AI companies in San Francisco, Centers for AI Control and OpenAI, who developed ChatGPT. And what we found is that really the hottest thing right now when it comes to the risk is around social engineering. Its ability to create human avatars, voices, impersonate voices, and create odd hacking and cybercrime campaigns at a level that we've never seen before the AI was really publicly available. So I'd say that enhanced phishing campaigns, the voice cloning is requiring a lot more human validation and a lot more education around this topic. And it's really bringing to the forefront how critical cybersecurity controls are and making sure you have a proven tool stack of advanced cybersecurity and a team to monitor and log your systems on a regular basis, like 24/7 at this point. So with that, I'll hand it off to Terry.
Yeah, thank you, Shauna. So first off, yeah, I agree with everything that Shauna mentioned, but maybe take a different view of it and my answer here. So I see there's really three avenues where AI is introducing risk to these companies. One is the attacks. So Shauna talked about social engineering, so the ability to sound like Terry or look like Shauna or act like someone else. Those social engineering attacks are getting much more effective and they're leading to bigger and bigger attacks. So the use of AI by the bad guys for cases like that. Another thing that came out of the news recently, you may have heard of Claude Mythos. So using these same Claude generative AI tools, the good guys and the bad guys, unfortunately as well, are now identifying a whole bunch of security holes in our in our IT tools that we weren't aware of before. So there's going to be a tsunami of holes and vulnerabilities the bad guys are going to be going after soon. So that's the second way in which the bad guys' tools are getting better. So that's kind of one set of things to think about. Secondly, is you need to improve your own tools have to start using AI. So your ability to detect social engineering, your ability to detect unusual activity, your ability to automatically respond to events. You have to get AI into your cybersecurity tool stack to manage that because you no longer have to wait. You no longer have the ability to wait over the weekend to resolve issues because everything's automatic. So deal with the attacks, address your tools. And third, I think we're going to talk about this third one quite a bit today, is just the user impact. So our users are using AI tools. That is a big risk. There's the risk of data going where you don't want it to go. There's the risk of connections. There's the risk of how do you secure and protect and validate your training data. So there's all sorts of controls in that area as well. But I see it in three big areas that people should be focused on.
Great answers. Do we have any other questions around this topic that anybody wants to ask? Jake, have you seen anything come in? Oh, you're muted, Jake, so I can't.
There haven't been any questions coming into the chat yet. No.
Okay, wonderful. So then how do we protect against AI systems getting manipulated, prompt injections, data poisoning, malicious plugins and integrations, especially once we connect AI to our portals and into our workflows? And I guess specifically to that, third-party apps have always been, right, an issue. So how do we better protect against that?
Terry, I'll let you
So,
take this one away and I'll
yeah,
follow.
I'll take the first step. So I think during this presentation, we're going to mention a lot of controls, and Shane has got the experience, and we're going to talk about particular things you can do. But once again, let's start maybe a little more broadly of AI governance. So there are control structures out there that say these are the 20, 30, 50 things you have to do, which is going to cover your prompt injection and your data poisoning. All those things are covered. So as we talk about how to protect your organization, if I were a participant listening in, start thinking about how do you organize all this? Because if it's just a random selection of thou shall do this and thou shall do that and thou shall not do this, you're going to lose things. So think of AI governance, which is going to cover inventory, your protections, expectations, your controls, those things. So that being said, what you need to do is one, consider the fact that in most cases, I would guess a lot of the participants are buying AI technologies as opposed to building their own. So you have third-party relationships with a Claude or a Salesforce or Zoom. All those people use AI these days. In that case, you protect yourself by thinking about the contract. So do you have a contract with Zoom? When you're done with Claude, do you know what happens to your data? There's a lot of contractual considerations in that space when you're buying AI services. If you're building your own, then you got a whole nother stack of issues to deal with. Good news being, when you consider what you have to do to protect yourself, there's not a lot of unique and new security controls that are out there. You must patch, and you know you should be patching anyway. You must control access rights, but everyone knows you have to control access rights anyway. You must back up well. Everyone knows they have to back up. So a lot of the foundational security controls still apply in the AI space. That's kind of the good news is that these are things that we know how to do. Unfortunately, we're just not always doing it well, and AI is exploiting these holes.
Yeah, I love that you brought up contracts, Terry, because I think that it's very easy in the fast-paced world that we're in, leveraging a lot of technology tools, to forget those contracts are generally called EULAs. That's an end user license agreement. And a lot of people do not realize that to use these SaaS or software applications, you have to approve the EULA. So you're in a sort of it's a version of a contract. And it's a great idea. I had a colleague who recently turned up an education platform, and it was leveraging AI, and he has a lot of experience in the industry, decades of technology experience, and had a great legal team. When I pumped his EULA into artificial intelligence, into our own, we provide private AIs for companies. So it's like a GPT, but it would be a Duthy GPT instead of Chat GPT by AI. Only Shauna has access and control to that AI. It's a proprietary product that we've worked on for about 4 years. And so I pumped that EULA, and I could pump it just like any of us into Chat GPT or Claude or Copilot, whatever your AI du jour is, if you will. And it's going to tell me how secure operating with that company is, where my data is going, what I'm signing up for, and what I'm doing. And that's more important than ever, is understanding our data privacy and management from a personal standpoint as well as professional. This was regarding my daughter going into school, and I did not engage, unfortunately, with the organization because of the EULA at this time, but we'll make some recommendations and adjustments on some things there to better protect their clients' privacy and put controls in place. So always a good idea to look at those EULAs. It's not always, it's pretty dry reading if we're being honest, but if AI can kind of summarize it for you, that's definitely helpful. But I think as far as the prompt injections, Shauna, just to cover a little bit more on that, is really making sure, and Terry kind of touched on this, that your private data for your organization is separated and tagged different from your public data, right? So private, if you're using an AI that's not your own private AI like Copilot, it's Microsoft does touch that data, and your information is coming and going from their systems when you use it. So I do not recommend financial, legal, human resource, policy data that's proprietary to you, intellectual property, going in and out of those systems. Make sure you're using a real private controlled, where you're the only one managing that data. And then also logging is really important when you're using artificial intelligence, making sure your systems are being monitored and logged. So if you're not working with the technology integrator that's providing logging right now, that's something that you would be advisable to look into.
And to
Okay,
kind of
thank
tie
you.
those pieces together, if I can add a little more,
Hmm.
if you've taken the time to write an AI policy for your company, it'll talk about things like what do you do at the end of the relationship? What kind of logging requirements are there? What kind of access control requirements? Take your policy and bounce it up against the EULA or whatever your contract you have, and just let your AI of choice match the two up. And hey, our policy requires logging, but the agreement doesn't log per our requirements. That's a great use case for AI. Match the two up and tell me where we have gaps.
I love that. Any questions come in, Jake, at all? Are we still good to go? Okay, so rolling out AI tools. So there's a lot of chat style assistance, right? So people, I always hear this is like the era of the AI agent, right? And there are AI agents in a lot of CRM. Salesforce has been really good about that. I use HubSpot now on a regular basis. They have AI integrated all the way through them. So what data, if we're using an AI agent and it is not our own AI, I think you kind of covered this as well, but what data should never go into them? So I heard legal, financial, HR, in healthcare, obviously anything that's personal healthcare information should never go into them. I tell people that all the time if they're using Chat GPT as their healthcare agent, I'm like, don't put anything in there that will identify you. So what do you think about what guardrails should not only companies be putting in place about what goes in and is used for AI, but personally, how do you, when you talk about it around the dinner table, what conversations do you have? Because people are using AI for everything. I read a stat that 70% of teenagers use it for some kind of companion these days. I don't know if you've read that, but that's a little weird, but
Oh, there's an article about somebody marrying their AI companion, getting ready to have a child. So this is the state of the crazy world that we're in. Yeah, T Terry, what would you want to share on Shauna's questions there?
Yeah, I'd build a little bit upon what she answered in the previous question is uh, know your data. So we talked about financial and legal. Um, if information, it really starts again, AI governance. Take a step back. Does everyone in your company know what is important data and what's not important data? So generally, I use the phrase covered information when I help companies with policies, because it could be medical, it could be financial, it could be business related, it could be who knows what it is. But collectively, what's your important data and what's not your important data? So right off the bat, the important stuff cannot go into your agent unless you have an approved use case. And maybe that's the second part of this answer is once you know your data types, go ahead and play with the non-important data. Use it as much as you want. Go fast, go break stuff and go learn how to use it. But if you're touching our covered information, something that's important to us, stop and you have to use a valid use case. And that's the other thing I talk about is make sure within your organization you start blessing use cases. You can use it for this, you can use it for that. So it's denied by default, but take a moment and approve these use cases because the use case will A, make sure the data is protected, B, make sure you have contracts in place. If it's customer facing, maybe it's even higher risk and you have extra scrutiny on there, whatever it may be. But by having a use case concept, your employees know to check in with whatever your use case committee is, and then they can do all the things that Sean and I have been talking about, the contracts and the due diligence and all that sorts of stuff. So I would suggest again, play with the stuff that's not important. If it's important, make it use case based.
Yeah, that's a great point, Terry. And I think it's important to note that there's a difference between generative AI and agentic AI. And I'd love to ask your audience or anybody on the call if they're familiar with that. I don't know if you're getting questions in the chat or any feedback there, but I'd encourage anybody have experience and knowledge around generative versus agentic. So jump in if you do, feel free. I'm always about the crowd involvement and community engagement, but the generative is really, it's great for ideation, for getting ideas for marketing campaigns, generating, that was really the foundation of what ChatGPT was built on. Really getting, feedback on emails, on text. You can do, handwriting to text translations. It does some great things. You don't want to put private information in there still. That would include, speaking to Shauna's point, PII, private identifiable information with any of, names, social security numbers, phone numbers, anything along those lines. You don't want to do that with that or agentic AI, but also PHI, like Shauna had described, that's the private health information. But really that's more ideation and it is interactive, which is what makes it so powerful, is it has creativity. But the agentic is really where you're leveraging AI to become part of your team. It's an agent. So think of agentic as agent, right? You're basically rolling out new technology to be able to take on repeated tasks that are low risk, that are, workflows that can then allow, not replace humans, because for us, it's humans first always, and leveraging quality technology through a proven strategy to best impact the humans that are on your team and allow them better roles in the organization, allow them to rank up quicker, allow the organization to grow faster, better, stronger, with integrity by putting strategic technology in place. So, yeah, so I think that kind of answers your question, Shauna.
Perfect. I love that. And I think it's going to answer a lot of people's questions too. So great. So how should our EGSA companies think about AI vendor security and model training on our data? Things like data retention, we talked about access controls. What about data retention? And then I want to talk a little bit about incident response. And I'd like to know from both of you, what incidences have you seen that are new that you hadn't seen before in like the last 36 months? So 3 years. Let's go before, Chat GPT really got adopted. How have the incidences that you've helped clients mitigate through, how have they changed?
Terry, you want to start or you want me to?
Uh, feel free. Feel free. Yeah, good.
It went from a small fire for the family around the campsite to the whole forest. Honestly, it is mind-boggling the extent that we're seeing cybercrime campaigns being executed as a result of the unethical hackers leveraging the tools that all of us are talking about here and seeing the potential for so much productivity. They're doing that, and they already were pretty seasoned and polished with deploying technologies around cybercrime. So once they added that, AI just 100x's potentially if you deploy it correctly, artificial intelligence. It's really not a whole lot different than the advent of the internet. My husband and I started with enterprise tech companies, Oracle, PeopleSoft, and Verio, before the internet was even rolled out in the 90s. And then we, rolled that into our own organization a couple decades ago. And it is essentially just like when the internet rolled out 90 years ago, or I'm sorry, back in the 90s, just 100 times that. So yeah, we've seen a specific campaign we saw recently was a number of law firms that were targeted and held for ransom through a campaign that just it was very polished. It was very believable. Unfortunately, some of the law firm's clients got access to the trusts of their clients and tapped out their trusts, tapped out the law firm's trusts. So the financial implications are astounding. And we used to see this, you said 3 years ago, Shauna, we were seeing significant ransomware and cybercrime campaigns in our office, maybe, once every month or two. And now it's daily at this point that we hear and see. And some of these, unfortunately, some of these organizations that don't have security and controls, the remediation to try to get their companies back is, it runs in the millions of dollars. And we had a cement contractor in the San Francisco Bay Area that had to close their doors. They were not a client of ours, but they came to us, 75 people on the team. The systems were locked down with ransomware for 2.5 weeks when we got engaged by the insurance company. And unfortunately, the group was real aggressive, and we were, nobody was really able to get that resolved, so they had to close their doors. But Kelly Moore Paints, same thing. I mean, it's affecting everybody. It's affecting SMBs, small and medium-sized business markets, more than ever, because they know that they don't have security and controls. They don't have a plan, and they're not prepared. And so, yeah, it's devastating, and it breaks my heart, honestly, to hear these companies calling and saying, "Oh my gosh, we call it after the boom." To the right of boom, and that's really not where you want to be, because that's in the seven figures, Usually at this point, the average ransomware request is 2.98 million for companies under 500 employees right now. And that's based on data
Wow.
from the Federal Trade Commission.
Well, thank you for that. Terry, do you have anything to add? You want to talk a little bit again about how companies that don't have a security program in place, like what's a good place to
Yeah.
start? And then we do have a question from the audience. So after you answer that,
Okay.
we'll go to our audience question.
Yeah, so first I'll talk a little bit about these cyber attacks that are coming that are AI powered. There are a lot coming, and Shauna described quite a few of those. But putting on my CISO hat, I would remind everyone you want to avoid the attack if you can. If you're attacked, you want to minimize the impact, but you really got to start focusing on what's now called business resiliency. So if your technology is out, if you get ransomware and you're down for 2 weeks, how does your business survive? If your key partners are offline for a month, how do you survive? Business resiliency is kind of the buzzword in the cyberspace these days. And AI, I mentioned Claude Mythos, which just 2 weeks ago identified thousands of critical security vulnerabilities. Claude's not going to release it yet, but undoubtedly everyone's going to find these vulnerabilities pretty soon. You have a very difficult time blocking every single one and correcting all these things. Do your best, but think about resilience. How do you survive as a business? That those are important conversations you have to start having. Um, and then you talked about particular incidents. I haven't dealt with those that had any serious breaches, knock on wood, but I do see a lot of small ones. So basic data loss issues are happening all the time. Again, things go into Claude, then the data's gone. A common problem is you have tools that you're already using, like Microsoft Office, and then behind the scenes, Microsoft turns on AI. AI is getting turned on and enabled by default, and it's allowing this data to move places that you weren't expecting. So I'm seeing a lot of data leak issues where data is going where you're not expecting it. That leads to regulatory issues or all sorts of issues that are out there. So data leak are the issues I've seen lately.
Great, and that's great. That's a great thing to remind people of for sure. So is it Mauricio Lopez? Can you actually ask your question? Because it was a little confusing the way it was typed. Is he able to
Hi,
come off mic,
Shana.
Jake?
Can you hear me?
Hi, I can. Hi.
Yes. So I am Mauricio Lopez with Davidson Sales. And Terry was mentioning a very interesting approach to deny by default as an approach to AI governance. And basically, just be conservative, say no until an employee presents a use case. Then you examine the use case, look at the pros and cons, and then authorize the use case of AI. It's a very conservative approach, protects all the data. Okay. And I was trying to maybe get comments from the presenters and from you, Shana, on the contrast with what Mark Zuckerberg did today, which is to say to 100% of the Meta employees, we're gonna track, capture, and log every keystroke that you do on your computer. Basically, and the employees are becoming the training data. But that sounds okay. He can do it. He owns the company. But well, what about the people that are typing in the W4s, that are typing in the social security numbers, that are so that opens, wow, huge risk, in my opinion. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, we're talking about kind of two different things. One is acceptable AI use, right? Like Terry mentioned, which is essentially the conservative approach, Mauricio, that you're referring to. So by default, it's zero trust. And then making sure that your AI acceptable. Do you have an AI acceptable use policy at your organization?
In my personal organization, yes. In my new
Okay.
company, I don't know.
Okay, that's great. And that's what we were talking about with the acceptable use policy, making sure it's consistent with what policy is one thing, but making sure it's enforced and compliant is another. So,
Yeah,
um,
good point.
so, so that is like so important is making sure that technology, policy, and then the human factor are all consistent, right? So, and there's a lot to that. But that being said, going back to what you were referring to, the software that you're referring to with Zuckerberg is called keystroke logging, and it is a great idea to have that. And it's like any technology or anything else, you get what you pay for. So if you get a really quality tool with good security, and you want it to manage data and operate swiftly and efficiently, it's going to be a larger investment. Keystroke logging will be training AIs. It will also be monitoring and protecting organizations from cybercrime and also helping manage and encourage our teams to be even more productive and efficient with the workloads that they're doing. So, I think to answer your question, are you asking if keystroke logging is like bad or good, or give me an idea
I'm, I'm,
specifically?
I'm drawing a contrast between what Terry suggested will be a good approach to AI governance for a company that is just not sure whether they want to expose their proprietary data to leaks or maybe unwanted uses against something where if a company mandates 100% use keystrokes, I'm not sure good professional HR professionals will be very comfortable that now, everything is not going to be really in their computers, or it's going to be sifted and transported to AI servers to train something. Yeah.
Yeah, if you have within your own organization, because that's all we can control, and unfortunately not the outside forces, because we wouldn't be here today if that was the case in a number of ways. But the truth is, if you have good policy in place and quality technology and you're training your teams, and that it's well managed. Like we said, if you have a private AI, there's not a lot of companies that have those. Unlike GPT or Claude or Copilot or these things that are, $30 a month, that is not a controlled environment. There is data leakage there. There are concerns, just like you're bringing up, whether they're using keystroke logging or not. So they're kind of two separate things, but you're right. There are concerns around all of these tools, whether it's a keystroke logger or an AI note taker. And that's why we go back to that end user license agreement and making sure, the policy around the third parties that we're working with are really built on experience, trust, and compliance, essentially.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was a great
actually,
question. Go
can I
ahead, Terry.
clarify a little bit on that deny by default? Just I may have skipped a step. So my model is risk based. If you have a very low risk situation, you're dealing with data you don't care about, it's totally internal, it's non-production, you go as fast as you want, and we just turn that on and you guys go crazy. It's when you're in the space of stuff you worry about. Maybe you work for the government, you have CMMC compliance, or you have contractual obligations, or whatever it may be. When you get to the area where you consider it to be medium or high risk, that's where I got to put the brakes on. So I've got a startup company I'm working with, and they are AI everything. They say we're going to be an AI company, and everything's AI, and they're cranking, and it's okay because it's all low risk at this point. They're not doing anything really. So it's kind of deny by default asterisk. If it's high risk, you deny by default. If it's low risk, you allow by default. So you can find the balance to let your folks run as fast as you can once you identify its lanes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I
Thank
think
you,
this has been
Shannon.
a great conversation. And I actually, one of the things that it can go into the next question I wanted to ask, which is about the ethical use of AI. So, almost if you're an employer and you tell all your employees by default, because I hired you and you're my employee, I'm going to capture every keystroke in your computer, then you have to, is that really ethical? right? So let's start talking about some of the ethical uses of AI and what individuals can expect in in the future. Now we already know the bad guys are using it, so I would call that an unethical use of AI. But
Agreed.
Terry and Shauna, what other situations have you seen where this question's actually been posed by some of your clients? Like, should we really be doing this?
Yeah, the ethics really come mostly in the space of bias. So there's a lot of attributes when you talk about AI and AI generative sort of solutions. Bias is the idea that you've trained your model on a large enough data set that it's a great representative of the space you're going to play in. So if you, for example, there's cases where you train your hiring bot, you have an HR function and you want to screen candidates. And if the historical data you use to train the bot is on old white guys because you're, I don't know, whatever it may be, a certain class of people, then your agent's going to think that old white guys are the right fit for this position, they're the best ones. So the idea of bias is really, I think, mostly where you hear ethical dilemmas. And it's not an easy solution. It's a lot of statistics and PhD sort of people to figure out how do you account for bias, but it's the training of the language models that really get people in a lot of sticky situations. That coupled with basic privacy concepts. We have the data. Can we use it? Are we allowed to do this? Should we use it? There's cases where you have three or four separate data sets, and now when you push an AI can gather more information than any of the individual sets together can provide. So that aggregate ability that AI has is very powerful, and especially from a privacy point of view, three data sets that individually are not identifiable put together may be identifiable. And that's what we're seeing.
Got
Yeah.
it.
Did you want me to touch on that, Shauna?
Yes, please.
Okay. I love what Terry shared because there is that it is all about the data. The quality of the outputs is just related to the data set and the management of the data that is the inputs. So Terry looks at it from a broad perspective, and I totally appreciate that with the ethical bias. For business leaders or IT resources within organizations like EGSA, I think when it comes to ethics and bad guys versus good guys, from a decision-making standpoint, I think it's important for companies to understand that their policy, their employee handbooks, which are generally updated probably every year or so, depending on what state you're in. We're in California, so yeah, we annually update our team handbooks and making sure that this technology policy is starting. You mentioned incident response plans, Shauna. There are a few documents that are critical to be in that handbook for your team from an ethical and liability standpoint, honestly. An incident response plan is one, acceptable use policy. I'm assuming everybody that's on the call or any EGSA businesses or any business today, if you have an employee that's using technology, you should own that technology. So you are allowed as a leader of the company to be able to install keystroke logging and other monitoring tools for what's in the best interest of the organization and that it's consistent with your policy and handbook. And this is where, like I said, the legal, the compliance, the policy and the technology are all, it's important to look at it from business outcomes and risk profiling as opposed to just slapping AI tools on and going willy-nilly, because we are seeing there are nefarious things happening, unfortunately, by employees. I mean, I'll give you an example of a tech CEO. I speak on, throughout the country to CEOs in the technology and the cybersecurity industry and have done so for many years. And one of our partners he's in Washington, D.C., and he had hired a new CFO, and she just was not getting the projects done that he was expecting. So he did install a keystroke logging device and determined she was watching crime podcasts and playing solitaire, but she was with a Fortune 500 company, but she was doing that 90% of her workday, and that's not ethical or fair to the organization, especially as the CFO. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how important it is to be monitoring and managing the technology. More resources need to go to that because otherwise there's significantly more risk for companies. And the great news is When the resources go to that, we see much better outcomes on driving revenue and improving the bottom line at the same time. So it's an investment, but it's really a win-win.
Hey, can I add one more point, kind of tying
Mhm.
some of these previous conversations together? If we talk about ethical issues and biases in your solutions, don't forget, majority of you people are going to be buying AI solutions. So most of the people on the call, you're not building them, you're buying them. What is your level of confidence that Salesforce doesn't have bias in its technology, or Zoom, or Microsoft, or whatever tool you're using out there? So you need to, again, back to the contractual protections, you got to look at your contracts to make sure you specify and make sure you have protections in place, because you as a consumer cannot influence the bias risk, but you will be held accountable if there's bias in the solution that you use.
Especially if you're using it for things like product development and stuff too. So I can see, yeah,
Yep.
where that could
Yep.
open you up whenever anybody uses products. So, does anybody else have any questions? I can shoot one more, but I think we're kind of near the end of what we had hoped to talk about. Um, any other questions from our audience today? Gosh, they're a quiet bunch, aren't they? It's typical of us EGA people. We're usually just
It's
really
big
quiet.
topic matter. Yeah,
Um,
understood.
so, Shauna, while I have you on screen, why don't you give us a really quick summary um, of what you think that you always coach your clients to look for when it comes to AI? So, why don't you just give like the quick list?
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I think we covered a lot here today. An outstanding job moderating the panel, Shauna and Jake, managing everything. And I did send over that slide that you requested if you want to share that. I'm happy to connect with anybody on LinkedIn. Education is so key around all of this because it's new to all of us, just like the internet was in the 90s, and just like technology is a newer tool that all of us leverage compared to things like electricity and managing accounting and legal and everything else. Those have been around a lot longer than technology, period. But what I will share, I think one of the, I think when you're deploying artificial intelligence, it really starts number one with planning. And even more important than planning in advance of that is an assessment. So you know where you're at. Our team does AI readiness assessments. So you can see it's not just artificial intelligence, but what is your cybersecurity posture? Who are you leveraging and using within and outside the organization to manage IT? What would they be rated? Most decision makers and C-suite executives just don't have the time or bandwidth to understand that. Our team breaks it down in a real swift and convenient format to help them understand what's their current posture when it comes to technology, cybersecurity, and artificial intelligence. So we've got a proven process for that. And then it comes down to planning, putting a technology business plan in place and making sure you're not just slapping AI tools on and bringing on a ton of risk. And they're not effective and they're expensive. And we're seeing that a lot right now. And then we're seeing a lot of the fallouts legally and otherwise as a result of that. So that's what I would share is some value that we can bring to EGSA, and then also, of course, on the private AI side of things as well. I would say the most powerful quote I have ever heard around artificial intelligence was from the CEO of Alphabet, who is the parent company of Google, Sundar Pichai, said artificial intelligence will be more impactful than fire, electricity, and the internet. I mean, to hear somebody of his stature with a quote like that really puts it into perspective. There's a lot of things we can't control as it relates to artificial intelligence, but there's no question it's here. It's here to stay now. At this point, it's not as regulated as one would anticipate, and it's important for us to get educated on it. So kudos to all of you on the call just for being here today and learning. Our approach is very informative and educational. That's why we're dedicated to our clients 110% to making sure first and foremost their security is in place. So AI is powerful, but it should never be deployed without authority and experience, in my opinion.
Well, thank you for that. That was a great wrap up. And Terry, same thing. What are like the top 5 things that you
That was
want
a
this group
smooth
to
wrap
take
up. I'm not
away?
sure I can follow that one too well. We'll
You
see.
can.
Yeah.
You
Uh,
got this, Terry.
yes, again, nothing new. This is the wrap up. I would say think of the lessons we've learned as business owners over the past 25 years. We've had to deal with personal computers and the internet and all this cloud technology and social media and now AI is coming around. A lot of the same lessons are there if you think back. You've got to you've got to understand what's going on. You have to understand what data is being used in there. You have to understand the security requirements in the space. How does it impact your regulations? What does that mean from a risk perspective? So take the time to think through it. And again, I'd collectively call that AI governance. But again, what data is allowed in, what data is not allowed out? You know, what's expressly prohibited. Think about a risk perspective. Um, as I mentioned before, there's not a whole lot of new security controls you're necessarily going to need because you're already patching, you're already encrypting, you're already backing up. Make sure you do them well. But unless you're building your own AI, you may not need a lot of that. Think about third parties. You know, you're most likely you've got AI partners right now, whether you know it or not, because everyone's an AI company. So if you have partners that you have AI partners to deal with and vendors. So yeah, I would say structured approach to it. Identify what you're worried about, what you're not worried about, and then the not worried space, let them go as fast as you can because you don't want to be left behind in this seismic business shift that we're all living through right now.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you, everybody, for taking the time to come to this educational session today. The AI Task Force has plans of doing 3 more sessions this year. This was our first of 4, where we're going to be covering the hottest topics in AI. So make sure to keep watch out for marketing from the EGSA staff on that. And thank you, Terry and Shauna, for taking time to come today and educating the people at EGSA. I think our goal here at the AI Task Force is to make sure our members are not falling behind and are really well informed. And today, I think we really did a good job on that. So thank you so much.
You did indeed. You knocked it out of the park. Our pleasure, Shauna and Jake. Thank you. And
Thank you.
everybody on the call.